It is Monday morning, July 18th. Unique F. Okay. We are headed to get some gasoline. Rawlings. Okay, everybody. This is John, and I'm going to take a couple minutes here and do a map recap of part 1 through part 6 to kind of guide everybody around, have a look at the routes that we were traveling on. If you're not interested in this and you just want to jump straight ahead to part 7, then use the chapter links in the description or in the comments to skip ahead. So in part 1, I started here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I rode this purple route down here, which is part of the New Mexico BDR, but this is actually what they call the Albuquerque Scenic Connector or something like that. And I took it down here, and this is where I stopped in Mountain Air and replaced the bolt that was missing in my helmet visor here in Mountain Air, and then continued on. Real pretty scenic stuff through here. And this is where I stopped at the Gran Quivira ruins. And when I reached Carrizozo, at this point, this is where I connected with the actual New Mexico BDR, which is this dark blue colored line. And I followed it down through Ruidoso, and then the color changed to purple. And this was the section I did down to Cloudcroft right here, where I stayed the first night. The second day, I rode out and I rode parallel to the BDR on this highway here, which is Sunspot Highway, and took it all the way down, crossed BDR, and went down into the town of Timberon, which is this set of, looks like streets, but this was like gravel roads and hills, and it was actually a little bit confusing in here. And my goal here was I wanted to make it to this road right here to go down the mountain and to go across and connect over to the highway to El Paso. But what happened was this is where I got stuck with a private property closed fence, and this road was not accessible, and I really couldn't figure out a way other than to take the long way around. So I headed back up and I got on the New Mexico BDR and I followed it all the way across. And this was some pretty good unpaved riding. Some of it was a little challenging, but followed it around and then down here to this town. I think it's pronounced Pinon. It looks like Pinon with a little accent. From there, I took this roadway here, which was actually kind of crazy gravel, a lot of elevation, and it was kind of surprising and very remote until I got down here into this very desert area. This was extremely remote, and this is where I stopped for a minute to take a break under some shade. From there, I continued on to Highway 54 and took Highway 54 down to El Paso. Once I was in El Paso, I met Steve at the motorcycle dealership. Then we rode right along here, along the Rio Grande, and then up and over and along this highway here that went straight across right on the United States border. And you could see across the border, and it was very, very wide open and just nothing out there, just wilderness. At this point, we reached the little intersection of the town of Columbus and stopped for a lemonade, and then basically took the highway up to Deming. And because it was already twilight, we skipped going over to this section. We were originally going to try to connect over here to the Continental Divide Route. We just took this Highway 180 in the dark and up to Silver City for the night. The next day, we left Silver City and we followed the route around here, did a little bit of gravel, and then some kind of cool twisty roads, and this was the point. I believe this road is called North Star, where we encountered a road closed sign, and it was a new sign that said that the road had previously been publicly accessible but was now private. We couldn't find another way around, so we ended up taking this loop all the way back down to Silver City, and this was all really fantastic roads, actually. Very twisty, kind of got up in some elevation. Back in Silver City, we couldn't find anything to do other than to take this green bypass, which was actually really nice. Again, very scenic and a fun ride. Somewhere along here, we stopped for gas in Glendale, and then headed east. And I don't actually recall what route we took here, but we connected back to the Continental Divide Route and followed it up and all the way through to Pie Town, which is this intersection right here. And from Pie Town, we started seeing storms. And it was monsoon rainy season as we were going through New Mexico. And right along here is where we encountered all that awful mud and where Steve dropped his bike. And it was pretty tough. And then it started raining. And so there were so many miles along here where we rode through that mud in the rain until finally, somewhere approximately around here, the rain stopped. I pulled the GoPro back out, and we continued on until we got to this paved road. At this point, the rain clouds were over here, and we decided not to try to go through more mud in the rain. So we took this Highway 17, which was very scenic. 117, very scenic. This is where we passed the area called the Narrows right here, and we stopped here at El Mapes Conservation Area, where they had the neat archway and the rocks and all that. From there, we continued on to Grants, where we stayed the night. The next day, Steve attempted to get his handlebars fixed, but ended up getting a tip from another motorcyclist about a shop in Albuquerque. So Steve headed to Albuquerque, and I continued along the route up here through real nice kind of scenic mountains. And up here is where I did a little drone flight and got some cell phone service and found out that Steve had arrived at the repair shop. After that, I descended the mountains, and this is where things got a little bit sideways. Once I came down the mountains here, this is the section where there was a sign that I was worried that was going to indicate private road. In fact, if I click on this notes, you can see here it says private waypoint possible. So the sign did say private. I turned back. I went back here, and right around here in this little town of San Mateos, where I met the guy on the three-wheeler, and he told me, no, you need to go back. That's the correct way. Ignore the sign. So back into the route heading north I went, and this right here is where I made my mistake. And I went over this in the prior video, but this purple and green line are the two CDR tracks that I was following. One is from GPS Kevin, and one is Cannon Shot. And a lot of places they're similar, and some places they deviate. And the colors change all the time. So when I say purple, it's purple at this segment, but the next segment may, be orange. But right here is where the mistake happened. Both of those routes went into here, and this is where I went straight into a ranch, into private property. And this is the road that I struggled to find. And when I did find it, it was not in any condition that I wanted to go down. It's very washed out and muddy. It wasn't even really a road, and I wasn't even sure if it was public or not. This blue line is the New Mexico BDR, which I actually had turned off on my phone's Gaia at the moment, so I didn't notice this turn off here. And this is the mistake I made. I should have turned this way, followed this San Lucas Road, because as you can see, they connect back after a few miles. And then that is the back way to Cuba, where all of this looks like it was probably pretty fun. But I messed up. So I took yet another ride around which was this green route right here, which was a little bit scenic, but also not all that exciting. But it connected. It took me into Cuba, which is over here. I've got a lot of extra tracks all my tracks are kind of showing mostly here, so you can ignore some of these. But this is Cuba, and Steve headed back up this highway and met me in Cuba at lunchtime. After Cuba, we headed back on the route, and we followed this blue line. If I'm not mistaken, this is the track we followed. It was fun riding, and we eventually hit this highway, which took us over to Abiquiu, I don't know how to pronounce it, Abiquiu Lake. And at that point, we had originally planned to leave Abiquiu and head this way into, as far as we could, into possible dispersed camping. But there was another monsoon storm happening over here to the east. And we decided, again, not to ride in the rain. So our plan was to take this bypass highway here and then cut across after we cleared the storms and rejoin the route. But around before we got to this turnoff, we were in heavy construction on the roads, and we realized that we did not have enough fuel to make it to our next fuel destination because we've forgotten to refill at Abiquiu. And the gas stations here at this intersection were both closed at 5 o'clock. It was just 5 o'clock, and they had both closed, and they did not have pay at the pump. So we were told that the closest gas was up here in Chama. So we decided just to go to Chama, and that ended up being our destination for the night. It was actually a really nice town. After Chama, we headed out of New Mexico. This first section was a very scenic paved roadway, but we were following the sort of narrow gauge steam train, I believe. We followed those tracks for a while until turning off onto this green section here, which was unbelievably beautiful. This is where we followed the stream with the fly fishermen, and it was just gorgeous scenery. Somewhere around here is where I cut my finger on my drone, and we decided to stop in Del Norte for me to apply some first aid to my finger, and we had lunch. After filling up gas in Del Norte, we continued north, and we followed the Continental Divide Route all the way up until we crossed into Highway 50, which we then took to Sargent's, where we camped for the night at the outpost. The next day, leaving Sargent's, we went up Marshall Pass Road up here to Marshall Pass, and then took Concha Creek Road, which is this orange option, down. This is where there was another incident of Steve had another incident and bent his handlebars again. So into Salida for lunch and to get handlebars repaired for a second time. After lunch, we continued along the route, following it north all the way up through the towns of Breckenridge, Frisco, Silverthorne, and then we headed out of Silverthorne to find camping. The first couple of campgrounds were full, but we found dispersed camping. Honestly, I don't remember where, somewhere along here. And we had a fun night camping there and chatting with our neighbors, some interesting folks that we met there in the campground. The next morning, I honestly don't recall if we took this section up along here. I believe we did, but I don't remember. I believe we did. But either way, we followed the route, and we took it all the way up to Steamboat Springs, where we stopped for lunch and met my friend Peggy and got gas. And then after that, from Steamboat, we headed back up into what was a really challenging section along here. I believe we took this green route at this point. I don't actually recall. It could have been this red route, but either way, this is where we had some really good kind of rocky roads and gravel And then we had the really steep descent that took us down the mountain. And at some point in here is where we passed the little, I don't know, camping commune. We don't know what that gathering was, but shortly after that is where Steve had his accident. After that, we decided to head straight into Rawlings. We talked about looking for a bypass, but instead of taking any kind of paved bypass, we just followed the route. And it was luckily not too much to handle with Steve and his shoulder. So we headed straight north all the way up to Rawlings. So that brings us to where we are now at the beginning of this episode. I'm not going to give any spoilers about what's about to happen, but I will preface this with a few explanations. If you're not interested in hearing any more, go ahead and skip to the chapter start of the video. But where we are right now is leaving Rawlings. Steve once again found a place to get his handlebars corrected a third time, and I did laundry. And then once we finally hit the road, it's we made a decision here. Basically, this orange route is the standard. It's what we call the cannon shot route, which is the nickname of the guy who created this route and shared it online. I believe this is also the GPS Kevin route, although I think this green route may be a Kevin route as well. This blue route and this purple at this point coming down, that's the Transamerica Trail as designed by Sam. So when I mentioned that we're trying to take the Sam route, what we are trying to do is to get over to this purple. And driving along this interstate ended up being that was not an option because of the extremely high winds. It was especially on my Royal Enfield, was not an option. Taking the standard orange route to go from Rawlings all the way to Pinedale up here is, I think, 220 miles of no services, no humans, no gasoline, through basically a landscape of nothing. And I did not have the range in my bike to make it the whole way. I had a little MSR bottle of extra gas, but I don't think that was enough to even get me there. Steve had a fuel, Steve had a fuel bladder that we could have filled up, and that probably would have gotten both of us there. But after talking about options, we decided to try to make it over to Sam's track and refuel in Wamsutter, this town right here. Taking the interstate was not really an option for our bikes, especially in the wind, which was coming straight diagonally this way. So it was a headwind if we were going to the west. We decided to take this blue route here to Wamsutter, which is one of GPS Kevin's routes. So now to the video, picking up right here.
So the actual Continental Divide Route from Rawlings to Pinedale is something like 217 miles with no services. Straight through. It just looks to me like straight through nothing. We've decided to change it up slightly. And so the Transamerica Trail crisscrosses both in Rawlings and in kind of near Pinedale. So we're going to switch over. We're going to ride Sam's Wyoming Tat route. And there's a gas stop midway. So that way we don't have to worry about filling up the fuel bladder. And I'm riding into like a freaking 20-mile-an-hour headwind right now. I think today might be windy and hot. Actually, in order to get to Sam's tat track, we have to take a short section of GPS Kevin Continental Divide. And the sign there just said road closed, or it said road closed during winter months, and it said dead end. So I think that the dead end is fake. I suspect maybe at some point up here there's a gate that is closed in winter. Worst case, we waste our time driving down a crappy gravel road for no reason. That answers that question.
Fuck it up. Looks like we turned off Kevin's route there.
Did we? Maybe so. I wasn't watching. I was just driving straight. Oh yeah, we're way off. Okay. Alrighty then. So we're heading back to Rawlings. Just got dead-ended by private road. So the dead end sign at the beginning of this road was in fact correct, but at least we get to see the scenery again from a different direction. So now, I guess we'll top up the gas again and we will take cannon shot route. We got a late start because of all the errands and things this morning, so I'm guessing we could make it to the campground by 8. And I'm also guessing it's going to be an entire day of roads exactly like this. We'll find out. I keep saying that, I think. And I don't always like what we find out. But for the most part, everything's working out pretty good. Taking a break here at Sweetwater Station in Wyoming. Let me show you what the wind looks like here. We've been riding the most hellish road. It feels like it's been 65 miles straight uphill and into a headwind. Actually a cross headwind. Bikes riding like this down the road. I can't really go faster than 50 miles an hour. I'm in 4th gear, pretty much wide open. It doesn't matter, it won't go any faster. And we have 40 more miles till we refuel, and then we will hopefully head up into some national forest and get away from this exposure. We decided to stay on this roadway and refuel in Lander rather than getting out in the scrub and having, you know, this crazy wind blowing us around on a gravel road. So that's currently what's happening. We also found ET. Another traveler. The moped adventure of ET. How many miles total have you done?
No English, sorry. Español.
Okay. Oh, Español, okay. This gentleman's crisscrossed the country from Miami, Chicago,
Parque Yellowstone.
Yep.
Colorado,
Yep, Colorado.
Las Vegas,
Las Vegas.
San Francisco,
Yep.
go Los Angeles.
And Los Angeles. And then back home on a 50cc Vespa. No problem though? Excellent. Thank you. Maybe. Now the wind's going the other direction. Well, I guess we've turned. We just saw, oh, there's trees. We just saw one of those highway digital signs that said warning of wind gusts 40 plus miles an hour. Oh God. Just fueled up in Lander, Wyoming. Talked to a friendly guy about some tips about some of the roads. But I've routed out something in Gaia to get us up into the mountains. He called it Loop Road, and he said it's real good road. And then we'll come down from that to South Pass, which is where we'll reconnect to the route. Hopefully the wind will be less extreme where we're going. and it'll be cool when we get into the hills. believe we're almost back to Highway 28. I think we're on the other side of the mountain now, and the wind is kicking again. This road sucks right here. Good grief. Okay, we just, my battery died, but we just got down to Highway 28 and rode that for probably 10 miles and caught back up to our track. And here's the funny thing, at the same time that we caught back up to the track, somehow we caught back up to the dude with ET on his Vespa. Which was pretty funny. So now we're on the track. Good grief, look at this road. And the wind is blowing.
I was holding that thing wide open for like the last 25 miles. We're almost there.
What's this restaurant? What's this motel?
Boulder Inn Motel Restaurant.
You want a camp or a hotel?
I want to go probably into Pinedale, and I don't think it'll be dark by the time we get to the campground. And I don't know. I mean,
if we can find a decent hotel, I'd rather do that with my shoulder one more night than camp.
Okay, I'm good with hotel.
And then camp.
Yeah.